Hello, my friends. We have already learned about one religion that was started in ancient India. We are going to learn about another one today. The religion that we have already learned about is Hinduism. I've pulled up our chart that we completed in our lesson about Hinduism to help us remember what we learned about it. In Hinduism, there are many gods and goddesses. We call the followers of Hinduism Hindus. The holy text in Hinduism is the Rig Veda. And our three most important gods in Hinduism are Shiva, Brahma, and Vishnu. Today we are going to fill out those same characteristics about another religion, Buddhism. Before we get started, I want to go over some of the vocabulary words that we'll see. Buddhism. Buddhism is an important world religion that honors Buddha and his teaching. Buddhism began in India many, many years ago, but it is practiced by people all over the world today. Suffering. Suffering means misery or pain. For example, natural disasters cause suffering for the people affected. Venture. To venture means to do something despite a possible danger or risk. For example, despite great dangers, firefighters often venture into burning buildings to help others. Conquer. To conquer means to overcome something by mental or physical force. For example, Jimmy was able to conquer his fear of dogs after his mother took him with her to volunteer at the animal shelter. He saw that all of the dogs there were gentle and sweet. Are there any fears that you would like to conquer? I want you to turn to whoever is there helping you and tell them about a challenge that you have conquered this year. It might be something that you learned at school, like reading, or it might be something outside of school, like learning to ride a bike or learning to shoot a soccer goal. Look at this photograph. Do you have any ideas about what it could be? This is the Great Stupa of Sanchi, one of many sacred, dome-shaped shrines built all over Asia to honor the Buddha, the founder of Buddhism. Today, we will learn a little bit about Buddhism, the world's fourth largest religion, and about the Buddhists who practice this religion. It all began about 2,500 years ago with the birth of Siddhartha Gautama in the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. Siddhartha was a prince born to very rich parents. Siddhartha's parents loved him very much, so much in fact that they wanted to protect him from all of the suffering in the world. By doing so, they thought he would always be happy. So, Siddhartha was kept behind the walls of the palace and was given anything that he wanted. Fine food, beautiful clothes, wonderful toys, and plenty of servants. Siddhartha knew very little about the life outside of the palace walls. Then, as Siddhartha grew into a young man, he began to venture out beyond the walls of the palace. So despite the possible danger, Siddhartha began to explore beyond the palace walls. Driven by a servant in a horse-drawn chariot, Siddhartha was shocked and dismayed to see what his parents had kept hidden from him. On one trip, he saw a poor old woman, bent over and barely able to stand. On another, he saw a sick and hungry man lying by the side of the road, crying out for help. On a third trip, Siddhartha saw two people weeping. Are these nice things that Siddhartha is seeing? No. All around him, people were suffering. Siddhartha began to worry about all of these people outside of the palace walls. What, he wondered, could he do to help them? Seeing all of this suffering, Siddhartha could no longer be happy with his comfortable life. And so, he made the decision to leave his riches behind. One night, he crept out of the palace, moved beyond its walls, and headed out along India's dusty roads in search of answers to his questions. For many years, Siddhartha wandered the land, studying with spiritual teachers along the way. He was forever asking his teachers how to conquer suffering and achieve happiness on earth. None of their answers seemed to satisfy him. One night, stopping to rest beneath a fig tree, Siddhartha crossed his legs and vowed that he would not move until he had the answers to his questions. Make a prediction. How long do you think Siddhartha will have to sit there before he can answer his questions of how to conquer suffering and achieve happiness? All right, now that you've got that prediction made, let's find out how long it really was. Siddhartha sat under the fig tree for 7 weeks, meditating on his questions. When he finally had the answers he was searching for, he felt like an entirely different person. During those 7 weeks, he believed that he had received enlightenment. In Buddhism, when someone receives enlightenment, it means that the person gains a greater understanding of life, no longer desires or wants worldly goods, and is then believed to be free from suffering. Siddhartha now thought he had a new and deeper understanding about life, why people suffering, and how to end suffering on earth. Siddhartha became known as the Buddha, meaning one who is awake, or enlightened one. What do you suppose Siddhartha, the Buddha, learned during those 7 weeks? The Buddha learned several lessons, and his lessons became known as the Four Noble Truths. These 4 truths are: 1. All people experience suffering and unhappiness. 2. Suffering and unhappiness come from greed, or desiring or wanting too many worldly things. 3. Suffering and unhappiness end when unrealistic desires end. If something is unrealistic, that means that it is very difficult or impossible to achieve. And 4. People can end suffering and unhappiness by following a few basic rules. The Buddha's rules may sound familiar to you. They include things like: be kind to others, do not tell lies or cheat or steal, do not be selfish, do not harm people or animals, train your mind to think clearly. The Buddha lived a long life, traveling throughout India, teaching others about the Four Noble Truths and his rules for life. He had many followers in his lifetime, and Buddhism spread to many lands after his death. One person who is credited with helping the spread of Buddhism is a powerful ruler named Asoka. Asoka was not always an enlightened person. Rather, he was a warrior king who led many soldiers into battle, wounding and killing thousands of people as he expanded his great empire. How would you describe Asoka, who led many soldiers into battle? Does it sound like he was greedy and desired too many worldly things? But one particularly violent battle changed Asoka's life. As he rode across the battlefield, seeing how his desires to rule a great empire hurt others, he became horrified by what he had done. Asoka decided that day to change his life and study the teachings of the Buddha. From then on, instead of sending men into battle, he became nonviolent and sent trained teachers throughout Asia to spread the teachings of Buddhism. How would you describe Asoka now after he began studying Buddhism? Is your description different than your first description of him? Often traveling in great caravans, Asoka's trained teachers did more, much more, than preach and teach. In India and far beyond, they carried food and medicine to help people in need. Asoka also ordered his teachers to build hospitals for people and animals, dig wells and irrigation ditches, plant shade trees by the road to comfort weary travelers, and to build roads to ease traveling from place to place. Asoka made sure that the Buddha's messages of peace and kindness were carved on big rocks and stone monuments all over India. Although he allowed his people to practice Hinduism and other religions, he wanted everyone to be enlightened by the teachings of Buddha. Stupas, like the one you saw at the beginning of this read aloud, already existed, but Asoka built many more stupas to hold relics, or important historical objects, of the Buddha. Today, Buddhists travel from all over the world to worship at these sacred shrines. In our read aloud today, we heard, "Train your mind to think clearly." The word train in this sentence means to practice a certain skill. That is the first image on our poster. But train can also mean other things. Train can mean a group of vehicles that travels on tracks and are connected to one another. In our Telltale unit, we learned that another word for train used this way is locomotive. We see that on the second image on this poster. All right, my friends, today we learned about one of our components of a civilization. Which component did we learn about today? Remember, our components are cities, jobs, leaders, writing, and religion. Which of those did we learn about today? Yes, today we learned some more about religion. We've already talked about Hinduism, but today we talked about a different religion. Which religion did we talk about today? Today we talked about Buddhism. In Buddhism, we learned about a man named Siddhartha. How was Siddhartha's early life different from what he saw when he ventured out into the world? How was his early life different from what he saw when he ventured out into the world? Yes, in his early life, he lived in a palace where he was given anything he wanted all of the time. But when he ventured out into the world, he saw a lot of suffering. And he realized that not everyone was as lucky as he was to have the life that he had. How did his experience in seeing all of that suffering lead to the creation of Buddhism? Yes. When he saw that suffering, he worked with other religious and spiritual leaders to figure out how to overcome that suffering and how to make it better. And how to achieve happiness. The answers to those questions founded the pillars of Buddhism. When Siddhartha founded Buddhism and achieved enlightenment, he changed his name. They stopped calling him Siddhartha. What did they call him after he had achieved enlightenment? Yes, they called him the Buddha. What are the 4 noble truths of Buddhism? What were the 4 noble truths? The 4 noble truths were the lessons that Siddhartha learned. And our last question. We learned about Siddhartha, and we learned about someone named Asoka. Asoka was a ruler who helped spread Buddhism across Asia. How did he spread Buddhism across all of Asia? Yes, he traveled around and he taught people about Buddhism and explained what the religion was. He also helped a lot of people. He built homes for people that needed homes. He taught people about medicine and farming, and he helped them. All right, friends, we are going to add to our early Indian civilization chart again today. And the first thing we're going to add is this picture of the Buddha. Tell me where you think this picture of Buddha should go. Do you think it should go under jobs? What about cities? Does this look like a city? What about writing? No, this one's going to go under religion next to our pictures of the Hindu gods. Buddhism is another religion that was started in India and spread throughout the entire world and is still practiced today. We are also going to add this picture of the leader Ashoka. Oh, I just gave you a hint about where that one goes. Where do you think Ashoka belongs? He did help the spread of Buddhism. He helped spread that to all of Asia and the world. But he was also a leader. He was a king and an important leader. And leaders are a key part of civilization. All right, my friends, I'm going to have you open the PDF that's attached to this assignment, and I'll show you what to do. All right, my friends, when you open that PDF, it should look like this. We've got our chart that we filled out for Hinduism when we learned about Hinduism with all of our characteristics filled out. Today we are going to fill out the side on Buddhism. Our very first one says number of gods. Did we learn about any gods that they worship in Buddhism today? No. Buddhism does not worship any gods. So I'm going to use my text box. Oh, whoops, there we go. And I'm going to write none. Buddhism does not believe in or worship gods. Our next one is name of followers. We didn't talk about that one super closely, but it was mentioned in our reading. Those who follow Buddhism are called Buddhists. So I'm going to write Buddhists in my column. Unlike Hinduism, that has an actual text, the Rig Veda, that is considered holy to them, Buddhism does not have any specific texts that are holy to them, but some things that are sacred to them or important to them include the Four Noble Truths. We talked about the Four Noble Truths, or lessons, that Siddhartha learned when he became enlightened as the Buddha. Holy places for Buddhists include special types of buildings. We talked about one at the very beginning of our video, but there are many of them all throughout the world. Those buildings are called stupas. The one that we learned about today at the beginning of our lesson was the Great Stupa of Sanchi. Those are their holy places, or places where they worship. Important figures in Buddhism. Our most important figure in Buddhism is the founder of Buddhism, known as the Buddha. The Buddha had a name before he became the Buddha. Do you remember what that name was? His name before he became enlightened was Siddhartha. Gautama. I have to make my box a little smaller so it can squish in that space. All right, my friends, that very last box, I want you to fill out on your own. Our last box says, interesting fact. I want you to think of something interesting that you found interesting that we learned about Buddhism today and put that fact in this last box. When you have done that, you can go ahead and turn it in up at the top. And that is your last thing that you need to do for knowledge today.